Melinda, thank you so much for being a guest on She Leads. I am so excited to get to hear your story and just learn from you. So thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. It's very nice to be asked.
Yeah, of
Hopefully
course.
I can share insights that help other people.
Of course. So Melinda, you are the COO and co-founder of Octave Bioscience, a care management platform for mainly neurodegenerative diseases, starting with MS. And you're also an operations consultant for bioscience and health startups. So you advise other startups with how to run and scale their businesses. And even before that, you had this entrepreneurial spirit and experience in startups and scaling them to either getting the product to market or going from 8 to 85 people. So clearly you have this in you, this entrepreneurial itch. And I'm wondering, has it always been in you, or where did this start?
Well, I think the idea is I like to build things.
Okay.
So, and it's wonderful to get to start from scratch rather than fixing other people's problems. So getting to learn how to do it in environments early in my career so that when I went to do it on my own or with a startup, I knew what I was shooting for and really how I wanted to and do it what I thought was the right way.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, did you ever have people telling you, like, no, you're crazy, go do some conventional job where it's more secure and much less risk? Or were you just like, no, doing it?
Oh yeah, no, I get that all the time, particularly family members. My mother was like, why would you do, you're the first employee of these little, what's your job security? And I actually say, if you think about it, with a startup, you're very close to what's going on. So if it's not going well. And so you have more runway to actually figure out what to do. Whereas I have lots of brothers and brother-like equivalents, stepbrothers, brothers-in-law, and all of them have had the experience of walking into a lunchroom with the whole company one day and half the people walk out who are laid off.
Yeah.
And they didn't see it coming. And so from that perspective, I think it's not as risky as it sounds because you have more time to adapt. But also in a startup, you get to do more things. So you're not in one little box. You actually, I always say in a large company, 12 people each do one thing, the same thing. Where in a startup, one person does 12 things.
Yeah.
And that breadth of experience and skill building, if things do go wrong, gives you more ways to go for your next career move. And so I think maybe the job may seem riskier, but from a career perspective, it's not a risky way to go. At least I haven't found it to be.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective. So I'm wondering, how do you almost gauge where the success of the company will go? Because like for some people it's hard, like in the moment you're just like, I like the product, I think it could be something. But what do you do to know, like, okay, this could actually be a huge part in the market and this is why I'm gonna stay? Or
you don't know. I mean, you have to be invested in the journey. Okay. And I often tell people to think about equity as frosting on the cake. I mean, it is how you're supposed to give people an incentive. I think it's more a reward for feeling like if you really gave it your all, then this reward comes later where you feel like not only did we create this wonderful thing, but we were part of sharing in the success. Yeah. So, I don't know going in that it's going to be a success, but what I do, particularly since I'm always in technical scientific companies where I have no ability to assess it myself, is you look at the experts and what are they saying. Yeah. So with Octave, we did a lot of work early on, identifying pain points. Yeah. And what were people willing to pay for and interested in. So doing a lot of that deep research with the users and the stakeholders rather than just thinking, hey, I think this is pretty cool. Yeah. When I was the EIR in New York, right. there were doctors who would spend, 2 years on a medical device where, the curve of the handle for ergonomic, yet had never actually gone out to see what's the market size. And really there were only, 17 surgeries a month that would use that. And so there wasn't a market. And 2 years in, they figured that out. So I think doing the work early to see what is the pain point and what are people willing to do to relieve that pain point is the foundational work to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, for success for myself, it's really, are these the people I want to, this team, whoever it is, whether it's 1 or 5 or 8, which are the different companies I've helped start, are these the people I want to spend time trying to ride this ride?
Right.
And so do I think we can adapt and innovate and change and hang together when things get tough? And so that's been successful for me so far.
Yeah, I think that's really important, talking about the people and making sure that you can learn from them and really grow together. So you mentioned how it's really important that you do that research before and kind of not go in with just this blind eye with a product that you personally love. But so I'm wondering, it's really difficult for people to actually get started. Like they think they have this great idea, but going that next step is like often really hard, and like finding that little step. So I'm kind of wondering, what tips do you have for people to actually get started? And even more so, how much time do you spend doing that market research before you're like, okay, I don't want to be a perfectionist and like, I want to release it. How do you balance that?
Yeah. I've never been accused of being a perfectionist. Definitely, I have a bias toward action.
Okay, yeah.
80-20 rule. I love the 80-20 rule. I always think that, 80% is going to stay, 20% is going to change no matter what you're doing. You just don't know which. So just get something out there and learn. You will never get it all right. And so, but again, working with scientists always want more data and more data. And so in my career, part of it has been like, this is enough. Let's move. Mm-hmm. Let's test those theories you guys have. Let's get it out there and see it works. We think we have these hypotheses. Even with what we're doing now, we have hypotheses. Let's get it out there and test that.
Yeah.
How much is enough is if you are getting pretty strong signal consistently that these are problems that need to be solved and people are willing to solve them, and you've talked to enough stakeholders. So your question about how do people get started, there's so much. I mean, a lot of people have to keep their day job while they want to start their startup, and there's a lot you can do in the evening to do that market research. Figure out what the landscape is, who else is in that area, what are they doing, how does that look, how would yours be different? Even calling people in your network and saying, hey, here's my idea, how does it sound? What else should I be thinking about? Even if you just do one call a day, start learning about and start putting that together. Bill and I worked for, a year, just the two of us doing all that kind of work before we paid for anything to be done around our ideas. So you really can do a lot. If you think about what you're focusing on is there a business here? Yeah. Will people pay for this? Rather than how do I perfect my technology? The thing that I do that's really hard for some technology people when I coach people or consult to them is I say, talk to me for a half an hour about your business without talking about the technology at all. I don't want to know how it works at all. Wow. Just for this half an hour. See if you can do that. And that's actually extremely hard. And that tells me they aren't thinking about the business. They're thinking about the technology, and they need to think about the business.
Wow, that's a really good question to ask. I feel like people kind of just slips by them, and then they don't think, okay, how am I going to actually scale this, and et cetera. Right. So why health startups and why biosciences? What drew you to that? And have you dabbled in other things besides health, or have you always been in that?
So science-based, I think but as I've said before, I'm a STEM girl. I like science and math. I like systems. And so biological systems I find fascinating, how the body regulates things. So just doing something that I like talking about all day long. I've been approached to be involved in companies where I just thought I just wouldn't find that interesting to talk about all day. So that's part of it. And then the other part is really wanting to feel that I'm doing something that's making lives better. And healthcare, clearly has that mission-driven component to it.
Yeah.
And so I think between the science and what the science is impacting is really what drew me to that. Yes, I have had non-healthcare experience. I did an internship between my first and second year of business school in a computer technology related, and still don't care about the product at all.
Yeah.
Spent 3 months working on some manufacturing process stuff, but could not care less about the technology.
Yeah. So I'm interested now, kind of gearing towards Octave. Tell me a little bit more about the company and the founding story behind it, the inspiration behind it, any challenges you had on the way. Yeah.
Sure. So Bill Hagstrom, who's the CEO and my co-founder on this, he was the CEO of Crescendo, which was a company focused on rheumatoid arthritis diagnostics, blood tests. And in that capacity, he also started focusing on some of the reporting and data analysis beyond just the blood test. So early days of thinking about how do they give more value from understanding the biology. His company was acquired by a company that really wasn't interested in going into multiple sclerosis. Mm-hmm. He had thought that RA is a disease that has an inflammatory profile, relapsing remitting, and then progressive joint damage. MS has this relapsing remitting and then progressive CNS damage. And so he saw a lot of parallels there. And he was running the idea by a VC friend that had invested in both of our earlier companies at a dinner one night, and Brooke Byers, and Brooke was like, this is a great idea. And so Bill, with the permission of the acquiring company, started to look into it. And that's the point when I came back from New York and I reached out to Brooke and I said, hey, I'm back. What do you have for me? And he said, I have something. And the funny part of that story is, well, there are two little funny parts. One, he said, I have something. Are you interested? And my answer back literally was just yes. And my husband laughs. That's all you said? And I'm like, when Brooke Byers tells you he has something for you, you just say yes. Yeah. But the other funny part is I did know Bill from before. When Crescendo moved out from Oklahoma, my company at the time had just taken on a lot of space and we had some extra space. So I was his landlord for a few months. Yeah. And the way we worked the deal was very much an agreement without a lot of contracting, both of us being people of integrity, and that kind of established a really nice basis for us when we were reconnected by Brooke to work on Octave.
Nice. And so I know you have experience in scaling a business and you know what needs to happen to get it from 0.0 to, I don't know, in the market and successful. And so I watched your entrepreneurial thought leader seminar I don't know when it happened. And one thing you emphasized was hiring, and particularly how you never lower the bar. So I want you to just talk about that and kind of why it's so important for you and for other founders to do.
Yeah. So as I said in the talk, people believe that you need to hire really well. That nobody says anything against that. Yeah. You need to hire really well. You want to hire rock stars. You want to hire A's and all that. But when push comes to shove, it's sometimes hard to stay true to that. And the push is you either, you need to hire somebody because in 3 months you've got to get a product out, and so you need their exact skill to get that product out. Or there's, a once a year conference that comes up and you need the person to be started before that. Or people are just, you've been looking for a while and people are really tired and they need that person to be doing that work because they've been covering it, as right. particularly as you scale. Yeah. And so people get weary, or people are, those are the reasons that people will lower the bar. Right. And even if they say they don't, you can see it start to happen. And so I've just never found any of those compelling arguments because you think you've solved a problem, but you've actually just either pushed it or created a new one. And so I do hold the bar high, and it's been interesting in this period of time, this COVID world. So there are 17 of us, and just, if we didn't already just all think so highly of each other and just have such a great time with each other and do amazing work, even more now, like we realize how much we miss each other. We are so supportive of each other and cranking out incredible work. I mean, we were on the phone with a professor at Stanford yesterday who said, I just don't even know how you're doing all this. I've never seen anything like this. And that there are only 17 of you is incredible. Yeah. Like your whole, academic center unto yourselves, and the number of patents you could probably do on all this. Yeah. So reinforcement that if you really do stay true to that, it will increase the velocity of your company rather than getting slowed by just one or two people who can start to bring the whole thing down.
Yeah. So how do you keep your employees motivated? The ones particularly in that last case where they're getting tired and they're getting tired for doing this person's work and we need someone in this position. Like, how do you make sure that they're still being motivated and productive?
Yeah, I mean, number one thing I've always found that motivates people is having interesting things to work on. If you hire for people who like to do challenging, interesting work and are good at it, then if you just keep feeding them challenging, interesting work, yeah. The rub is when there's grinding kind of work that is also part of it that they want to get out of. You be as transparent as possible about what you're doing to get them help, and you give them a voice in the hiring. What do they think of each person? Yeah. And then you're very clear about if you choose not to progress certain candidates, why that is. And then with the people who have struggled the most with it at Octave, they've completely come around because they see now, wow, the difference. And then they think back on some of the people they thought were good enough and how different it is that we have these other people in place.
Yeah. So I imagine another challenge in bioscience and biotech is just testing a product or testing this test for some disease, and it's taking months in the lab, and then tell me if this is right or wrong, and then like discovering that, okay, it won't work, or this is not, we're going to have to pivot to something else. So how often does that happen, and how difficult is it for you personally to like, okay, stay motivated and then have that trickle down as like a leader to everyone else working on that product?
Yeah. So in one of my companies, we actually had 3 tests we were looking at developing. We went forward with one, put the most time into one. It was an idea where it had been shown in 30 people that this was something that we could build a test around. And so then we did it in 300 people, and we found it wasn't true. That signal wasn't there. Yeah. And so we had 2 other products to be moving forward, and so switched to that. But what we did was we said, hey, this is really cool in that we've disproved this. So nobody else is going to need to waste time and continue on. And we published the negative results. Oh. We've disproved earlier work by somebody else. And that gave us a lot of scientific credibility for our follow-on test. So in this world, we say the biology is what the biology is. You can't make it something that it's not. So if you do a lot of pre-work, just the same way we did the market research work, we did a lot of pre-work for reason to believe there will be a signal when you develop a test. And the more you do that, the higher the likelihood of success down the line.
Right. So, okay, so that's great. So even if it isn't successful in what you intended, there's still definitely a silver lining in that it doesn't work, and that will help other companies and everything. That's awesome. So you are a COO, and you have operational experience way before. So I'm wondering, what are some key traits and skills that every COO has to have?
Yeah. The role has been different in every company I've had. It's different in one way, that who's the team that's starting this. And so for me, as in the early days, the very early days, my job is I fill in all the gaps. Okay. So if we have a strong CEO who's had a lot of experience, then I do less of that work. Mm-hmm. If we have strong scientists or medical people or whatever pieces are there, I do all the rest. Mm-hmm. So for the last 3 companies, what my actual job was has been different. Yeah. And so I need to be a generalist, but at the end of the day, it's about building. So whatever pieces need to be built. So for example, with Octave, I'm a head of product, and I have been since the beginning, because as we look for a head of product, somebody's got to fill that role. Yeah. And so there I am, but I'm also the CFO, and I've always been the CFO, acting CFO, I always say. I've always been the head of people engagement, or whatever the term is, the latest, greatest term. So facilities, all that. So setting up all the systems, that's always been, or as some people like to say, all the stuff nobody else wants to do. Yeah. That's always in my list of responsibilities. But what the other main pieces are have changed depending on who the other puzzle pieces are in any given team. But always the people part has been a huge. Yeah.
So I know you played crew, where you were a rower in college, and so I could relate to that in the sense that I'm a soccer player, and definitely different experience. I'm sure I'm not waking up at 5 a.m. every morning to go row, but I am wondering, what skills do you see even now in your leadership style, or purely just as an entrepreneur? What skills do you see translate over from being on the crew team?
Yeah, I think, just liking to be part of a team. Yeah. And as I've said, crew is the ultimate team sport, because you actually literally have to be working together perfectly for the boat to move smoothly. So that in general, but also in that particular sport, in my particular seat, it played to my sense of responsibility that I needed to lead and set an example, literally. People had to row like me, so that we all matched. So a lot of that, but then how it flowed into also with the teaching of rowing, how I thought about how to give people information, and that has really stayed with me. I did say a story to somebody just yesterday. We were doing a hard piece, and about halfway through, the coach said, "Okay, you're halfway through," and the boat almost stopped dead in the water. Never tell somebody they're halfway through, because if they're already dying, then they're thinking, "Oh my gosh, I have to do the exact same that I've already done, and I'm already dying." Yeah. even if you're 1 second past halfway through, you say you're more than halfway done. Yeah. And so that they like, oh, good, I can make it. Yeah. You know, I don't, it was just fascinating to watch the boat just like almost like sink. Yeah. Like we were not rising up anymore. And I just went up to the coach right after. I said, please don't ever say that again. Like that is, and that's really stuck with me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also interesting because you probably even like innately just learned some leadership styles from the coaches you had and kind of knew, okay, maybe this is not the approach to say you're halfway through, but rather once they're a little bit past or so is that
I see, you know, it's interesting because I did speak to that earlier where the novice coach was just tremendous and an encouraging person. Mm-hmm. And he's had a tremendous career. He's one of the winningest coaches out there. Yeah. And the varsity coach almost dismantled the program with his style, and he's never been heard from again.
Wow. So I'm interested actually, just to follow on this, and then we'll shift gears, but I'm interested, so how do you, as a leader, how do you navigate when, like, for instance, I'll bring the sport example, and some players respond well to this, like, hard ass, let's go, versus others respond much better to these positive affirmations and saying, like, it's okay, next one, keep it up. So how do you kind of navigate which one, navigate different people's leadership needs, I guess?
Right. And there are a lot of studies and books written about you need to manage the way a person needs to be managed. It's not just you have to have a management style. Yeah. You have to manage to the way they need to be managed. That was some course I took somewhere early in my career that was really eye-opening to me. Thinking about what the different profiles were. The teaching rowing had taught me that people receive information differently, but to take it to even another level of how somebody who might need a lot of time and information before they can make a decision, mm-hmm. where others can make a decision in the moment, you have to understand that so that you can bring out the best in them. Yeah. So you have to figure out what each person needs to bring out the best in them and try and manage that way within bounds. I mean, I'm never going to be the person who's going to tell somebody that they're doing a crappy job and they need to step up. Mm-hmm. I don't shrink away from giving real information for them to deal with. But as I say, I think the thing that I've grown the most in my career and focused on the most is how to give that information in a way the person can hear it and do something with it. Yeah. So the underlying message is the same, like this needs to change, but how I give them that information. Right out of business school, I would have said, this needs to change, do it. Yeah. Just the sheer, rational thought about it. If I tell you it, you can see how rational that is, and then, you'll make the change. Yeah. But refining my ability to say it in a way that it comes across and they can absorb it better and really do something with the information has been the major work for me over my career.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Yeah. So before we get to the more lighthearted questions, I am wondering, as a bioscience company, how has Octave transitioned during this stage with coronavirus? How has it been for you guys with all of this?
Yeah. So what was really cool early on in our understanding of what was going on was how many ways in which we wanted to step up to help. Mm-hmm. So we had an automation engineer, laboratory instrumentation, and she was asked to help Berkeley come up to speed on, they were trying to do more testing sooner, and so they needed somebody to help them get some instrumentation up. So she volunteered to help with that. We had some extra, we didn't have a ton of personal protective gear, but we had some where we thought if we opened back up tomorrow, we'd probably have enough so that we could run until we could get more. Yeah. So whatever extra we had, we were able to donate to the ICU in San Francisco. And so we really did focus, what can we bring to the situation, but still allow us to do the work to the mission that we have, be good citizens in this time. And so that was wonderful to see.
Yeah, that's so great. I think that's really important. I think the biggest thing right now is that we all just need to stick together and get through this. And I think it's brought out a lot of positive things, but yeah, I think it's definitely a hard time, and hopefully it'll end soon. So okay, switching the note. I'm wondering, what is a passion or hobby that you have that's completely unrelated to your work?
Yeah, interesting. Well, it's funny. So at work, I'm kind of a pinstripe, very organized and very clean. Everything's very serene. And you may be looking at my home office, and that is not what comes across. And so I have this. My family refers to it as my Martha Stewart side. Oh. I like to sew, so I sewed all these, things. When I want to take a break and just focus on something, I love to bake because what comes out is always happy at the end. Everybody loves baked goods, but the process of doing it too is calming for me, enjoyable. So that was probably. Most people wouldn't think I had that side because of how I approach my work. But I love to do all that stuff.
That's awesome. What's your favorite thing to bake?
Oh my gosh, really, just anything.
Really?
I do a lot of chocolate chip cookies. I've probably baked more chocolate chip cookies than most people in their life. Even in college, I would go over to my brother's fraternity and I would bake because they had big, industrial baking sheets, and I'd bake chocolate chip cookies on the weekend for all the guys.
That's great.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, I don't particularly like chocolate chip cookies. I mean, they're fine. I mean, they're good, but it's not like I feel the need. But other people, they've done a lot for me in my life.
Oh my God, that's great. So as a last question, and by the way, I love this, so thank you so much for coming on the show. But as a last question, what's a weird or fun talent that you have that no one else really knows about? And so what I've been doing on my show is I have this interesting talent where I can throw a blueberry in the air and catch it in my mouth. So I'm going to do that for you.
All right.
It's typically easier when someone else does it to throw it to me, but it's okay. Okay, so blueberry. There we go.
Very nice. Very nice.
So what would you say is yours?
That's interesting. And I know there is something because I've thought through what would somebody not know about me.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a talent, but things that people, a theme in my life, for many years, people thought I was a flight attendant. No. I got that all the time on flights from other flight attendants. They would always think, and it wasn't just that I was tall, so they were asking me to help put their bag, but they would ask me questions and everything. And so then I always joke, I don't understand why, but in case you're concerned, your exits are here. I was actually telling that story to a couple of flight attendants, brand new. They were in training, sitting next to me at some airport. And one young girl goes, "Oh, can you do that again? I'm trying to get that right, and you do it so well." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm like,
"Oh my God, that's hilarious." Are you sure you've never been a flight attendant? Are you sure?
I'd be sitting on a flight, and I remember one woman turning to me and say, "Are you deadheading?" I went to Berkeley. I think that means I'm into the Grateful Dead. Yeah. And I was dressed nicely, and I'm like, "No, I'm not going to a Dead concert." And she goes, "No, like you're a flight attendant." She just knew I was a flight attendant, and she's a flight attendant. I'm like, "I'm not a flight attendant." I don't know what
so funny. You have that look, I guess. That's the only. I don't know. That's really funny. Yeah. Well, Melinda, thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I'm so excited for others to learn from as well. But I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think it's wonderful what you're doing to try and help others. We can all share and learn from each other and make the world a better place because of it.
Definitely.
So thank you.
Thank you.